Hello. Let's talk high school football.
Oh, hi. Didn't see you there.
1 week from today.
Let's go.
It's like 1 week, and I think there's a game at like 5 o'clock.
And so
it's like
4
1
hours
week,
and
4 hours, and like 53
minutes,
let's
yeah.
say. From right now,
let's go.
there will be actual, real, meaningful, big boy Texas high school football.
We'll be at a game in like
7 hours.
a week
like
and 7 hours.
a week
Yeah,
and 7
'cause
hours.
it's a 7:30 kick.
Yeah, for out there in Beckville. So we are closing in on there. And one thing that I think, because realignment kind of threw things for a loop, one thing I think people may need a refresher on is the Class 6A playoff structure. So we always run through this every year with the playoffs. That Class 6A is different from every other classification in that they do not have pre-split divisions.
Yes.
They instead have teams that they're all lumped together, and then once the four teams of the four playoff teams are decided, the two biggest teams of those go to Division 1, and the two smallest teams go to Division 2.
And that is by school enrollment, not team numbers.
Not roster
Just
size.
to make sure everyone knows.
Just by school enrollment. And so, like, for example, you could theoretically have, like, if let me take the example of, like, let me make sure I get this right. Let me pull up my cool handy-dandy spreadsheet. Let's talk about Plano, okay? So the Plano ISD has, I believe, 3 of the 5 biggest schools in Texas high school football. Between Plano, Plano East, and Plano West, okay? They are the 3 largest. They're 3 of, like, I want to say like at least 5, maybe 6 biggest schools in the state. They're in the same district. In District 6A. If all 3 of them were to make the playoffs, you could have Plano, which might be like the 5th or 6th largest school in the state, play in the Division 2 bracket.
Which is wild.
Right? That can happen sometimes. But normally these things sort themselves out, and they've kept this structure in place for a reason for the past,
Put a number. Can you put a number to it? Like, I would say there's pretty much about 7 or 8 teams we're just always watching, and then everything else basically weeds itself out.
A handful of teams that are just kind of on the margins,
yeah,
right
around the 10
so
number.
that's what we're looking at today. We're looking at the teams that could go Division 1 or Division 2. Now, there are teams that could go Division 1 or Division 2 that are, frankly, I'm trying to say this in a nice way, that are not contenders.
Yeah, that are probably not going to make it.
They're not teams that it necessarily matters which bracket they go to, because we don't anticipate that they're going to play deep into the playoffs, okay? But there are a number of contenders who are going to have their fates decided by teams that aren't them, right? That are on that cusp, teams that we think can contend for a state championship, that are kind of reliant on who else makes the playoffs. In past, one of the teams we've been keeping an eye on has been Austin Westlake, because Austin Westlake can go Division 1 or they can go Division 2, depending on basically, like, does a team like Austin High make the playoffs, or does a team like Austin Bowie make the playoffs? Things like that. So there are these teams that would make a team like last year. Last year, for example, Austin Bowie was an extremely consequential team in the sense that whether or not Austin Bowie made the playoffs determined whether or not Westlake was going to go to the Division 1 bracket or the Division 2 bracket.
And that was literally, I think that came down to the final week of the regular season when we had to figure that out.
So, like, for example, Austin Bowie did make the playoffs, and as a result, that dropped Westlake to the Division 2 bracket.
Which we found out in literally week 11.
Right, week 11. If they hadn't made the playoffs, then they would have gone to the Division 1 bracket. You see how I'm saying? I'm trying to lay this out into a way that people can understand.
Yeah.
Because what I'm about to lay out are the teams that you need to be keeping an eye on, because they have wide-ranging impacts on what the brackets are going to look like, the 6A brackets, and where those, especially where the contenders within their own district are going to go. That's not to say that these teams, we're writing them off as not contenders.
Right.
We're saying that they are fringe playoff teams, and whether or not they get in or not is going to be extremely consequential. So these are, in my opinion, the most consequential teams in Class 6A in the 2022 season. We're going to start with
Keller Fossil Ridge.
Keller Fossil Ridge is maybe number 1 with a bullet this year.
Yes.
So Keller Fossil Ridge is in District 4 6A. District 4, 6A, and this is a team that went 4-6 last year, did not make the playoffs. They are going to be, but right now we would say that they're going to be duking it out for maybe that 4th playoff spot. Why does this matter? Well, South Lake Carroll is in this district, and South Lake Carroll is right there in the thick of it. So with South Lake Carroll, they've got an enrollment of 2,800. We'll call it 2,800. One team we feel pretty good about getting into the playoffs. One team that we feel pretty good about getting into the playoffs is going to be bigger than them, right? Keller, Eaton, Keller, Eaton, and Timber Creek are all bigger than them. Okay, in my opinion, the second best team in that district is Byron Nelson.
Yes.
They're smaller than Westlake, so now than South Lake. So you have one team that's going to get in that's bigger, one team that's going to get in that's smaller. If right now we project that Keller Fossil Ridge will not make the playoffs. Keller Fossil Ridge is smaller than South Lake Carroll.
Yep.
All that's to say, if Fossil Ridge makes the playoffs, South Lake Carroll goes to the Division I bracket, where they would have to play a team where they were last year,
right,
where they may have to play a team like Duncanville, or they may have to play some other big-time heavy-hitting teams that they otherwise wouldn't see, right? So that would be if they go to the Division I bracket. We presently project them to go to the Division II bracket, and we think they're going to win a state championship in Division II. It's where we project them. So it is extremely important to see whether or not Keller Fossil Ridge makes the playoffs out of District 4, 6A. That's one very consequential team. Let's go to another one, actually a pair of them. It's in District 11, Mansfield and Mansfield Lake Ridge. And the team we're paying attention to here is DeSoto. Now, look.
I was going to say, there's 2 other contenders where 3 spots are basically full.
So Duncanville is in this district as well. I don't think I'm going out on a limb when I say that I think Duncanville is going to make the playoffs. And I know I'm not going out on a limb when I say that Duncanville will go to the Division I bracket because Duncanville is the largest school in that district.
Yes.
They're locked into Division I. Okay? Also, Cedar Hill is in this district.
Right.
And now there is a play in which Cedar Hill could go to the Division I bracket, but that would require both Mansfield and Mansfield Lake Ridge to make the playoffs. If that were to happen, DeSoto or Cedar Hill would have to miss it, at which point it would be kind of irrelevant. Okay. The team we're talking about here is DeSoto, because DeSoto has an enrollment of 2,781. Right now, we project them to go to the Division II bracket because Cedar Hill, because Waxahachie and Duncanville are projected to make the playoffs as well. Both larger than them, that would bump them to the Division II bracket. Let's say Waxahachie doesn't make the playoffs, and either Mansfield Lake Ridge or Mansfield High, or theoretically a team like Mansfield Legacy, although I think that they're a little farther out of the playoff picture.
I agree.
If they were to take that spot vacated by Waxahachie, that would bump DeSoto up to the Division I bracket, where they would not be as much of a contender, in my opinion, as they would in Division II.
Right.
So,
and I think Waxahachie missing the playoffs would be the largest shock out of
it would be pretty
any
shocking.
of those options.
It would be pretty
like
shocking.
Even out of DeSoto and Cedar Hill.
I'm pretty bullish on Waxahachie.
Yeah.
But if they were to stumble,
right,
and Mansfield or Lake Ridge were to be the teams that benefit from that, that would drop DeSoto to the Division I or bump them to the Division I bracket, and that would be problematic for them, in my opinion. So for me, like if you're a DeSoto fan, you want to beat Waxahachie, obviously, right? You want to beat Waxahachie, but then get out your pom-poms.
Yep.
You want to be Waxahachie fans.
Yes.
Okay. On to the next most consequential team in 2022.
Which this is always the case.
And this is in District 19. District 19 6A is the Katy district. And now it's entirely comprised of Katy Ice.
Yes.
With the addition of Katy
Peyton.
Jordan into the mix. This is now a 9-team district with Katy Jordan being added. And the team that we are keeping an eye on here...
and Pato, right? Yeah, because they were
Peto's
581.
in there too. The teams that we are keeping an eye on here are Morton Ranch and Katy Taylor. And this has to do with Katy High. These teams are all kind of bunched up together alignment-wise, or as far as, they're divided up pretty clearly. They're all bunched together from an enrollment perspective is what I mean. Katy is kind of right there smack dab in the middle. Okay? Now, we project that Katy Tompkins is going to make the playoffs.
Yes.
Katy Tompkins is a little bit larger than Katy. We also, I think this is fair to say, it may not happen, but Katy Pato looks like a team that's going to make the playoffs. They're, of course, a reigning 5A state champion. It would be, the transition to 6A is going to be tough. New coach, things like that. Stranger things have happened.
Right.
For now, I'm going to pencil them into the playoffs.
Right. And this is a district where the ceiling is very high and the bottom is much lower.
So that leaves you with, in my opinion, 4 teams battling for one playoff spot. 2 of them, if they were to get in, would bump Katy to the Division II bracket. And Katy Cinco Ranch and Katy Seven Lakes. But if that final playoff spot in 196A is from Katy Morton Ranch or Katy Taylor, that would bump Katy back up to the Division I bracket, which is the bracket of doom, because North Shore lives there. A number of other big-time heavyweights, Atascocita, are going to be there. So you want to avoid Division I if you're Katy. If you are Katy, you are rooting hard for Cinco Ranch or Seven Lakes to make the playoffs. Right now, we project Morton Ranch and Taylor 6th and 7th in that district. But we also think that that's tight enough that it could close relatively quickly if something were to happen. Like if Cinco Ranch weren't to figure out their defense. They got to replace, I think, 9 starters on defense. So keep an eye on Morton Ranch and Katy Taylor in District 19-6A. Let's stay in the Houston area for the next one, and that's in District 23, and maybe one you're not paying a ton of attention to. 23-6A, the team we're keeping an eye on here is Alief Taylor, specifically as it relates to Alvin Shadow Creek. It's hard to believe that Shadow Creek won a 5A state championship just 3 years ago. But that's true. They did a 5A state championship just 3 years ago, and now our projections have them as a 6A Division I team. That's crazy, the growth that they've seen there. And Alvin.
And this is a new school too. Like to be fair, they came out of the gates and ran away with it.
But Alief Taylor's a really interesting story. The rest of this District 23. Okay, right now our projections are that we have Shadow Creek in the playoffs. I think that's fair. I think they're going to make the playoffs. Pearland, Dawson, and Pearland. Okay.
Yep.
In my opinion, I think they're pretty comfortably the playoff teams right now.
I agree.
Again, that leaves a couple of spots, or that leaves a couple of teams battling for that final spot. Okay. And actually, I could even loop in one more team here. If Houston Strake Jesuit grabs that 4th playoff spot, then Shadow Creek would be bumped up to the Division I bracket.
Yep.
But if it's Alief Taylor or if it's Alvin, and Alvin was closer than people think last year. They're getting better, I think. If either Alief Taylor or Alvin make the playoffs, that would bump Shadow Creek to the Division II bracket, where I think they could do some major damage. That's a huge turn of events there in Region 3 for both District 23 with where Shadow Creek goes, as well as District 19 where Katy goes. That could really shape what District 20, what Region 3 is going to look like, and therefore the entire bracket. So that's Region 3. Let's now bounce over to Region 4. We're going to start with District 25. And the team that we're keeping an eye on here is Cedar Park Vista Ridge. Now, Cedar Park Vista Ridge was a team that went 4-6 last year on the outside looking into the playoff picture. But the team we're keeping an eye on here is Austin Vandergrift. So Austin Vandergrift is a team I'm really high on. I think they're going to be really good. We just heard from their coach Drew Sanders with the annual State of the Vipers address. This is a Vandergrift team that I think is ready for prime time. But they also, in my opinion, they have got to go to the Division I bracket.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Division II bracket. They've got to go to the Division II bracket.
Yes.
If Vandergrift goes to the Division II bracket, I think they can play in a state semifinal, and maybe in a state championship game. Okay.
Yeah,
I think they're that good.
Region 4 is not.
If they go to Region 1 or if they go Division 1, and we'll talk about a couple of they'll at some point run into Lake Travis, and they might run into another team we'll get to in a moment.
Right.
The key team here is Cedar Park Vista Ridge. Now Vista Ridge is let's right now say that 3 of the teams that made the playoffs last year look like they're going to make the playoffs again.
Yeah.
Okay. Vandergrift, I think they're getting in. Round Rock, feel pretty good about them. Manor is moving up from 5A, but I think that they bring back enough that I feel comfortable putting them in.
They have Quentin Joyner, so that helps.
That final playoff spot is really up for grabs between. It kind of depends on where you want to draw the line. Round Rock Cedar Ridge is probably the favorite to get that 4th playoff spot. If Cedar Ridge gets that 4th playoff spot, all's hunky-dory for Vandergrift. Cedar Ridge is larger than Vandergrift, and as a result, that would drop Vandergrift to the Division II bracket where they want to live. Also, let's say Round Rock Stony Point were to have a big year, and they were to surge into the playoffs. Still hunky-dory for Austin Vandergrift. That would get them into the Division II bracket as well because Stony Point is larger than them. The question is going to be Vista Ridge, because Vista Ridge is smaller than Vandergrift. And if Vista Ridge gets in the playoffs, Vandergrift's probably going to the Division I bracket. That is a much tougher road to hoe than it would be in Division II. So, Cedar Park Vista Ridge is critical Critical for Austin Vandegrift's chances. And finally, we're going to end kind of where we started, and that's to talk about District 26 6A. District 26 6A is where Austin, Westlake, and Lake Travis live. Now, Lake Travis doesn't have anything to pay attention to. They're the largest school in the district. In the district. They are going to go to the Division I bracket. They're locked in. Right now, we project 2 5A move-ups.
Yep.
To grab two of the other two spots besides Westlake and Lake Travis. That's Dripping Springs and Buda Johnson. They're both smaller than Westlake. That would bump Westlake up to the Division I bracket. Okay, Westlake, of course, the number 1 team in our 6A rankings. One funny thing that happened in the in realignment is, and I don't know if it's been getting a ton of pub, very quietly, Westlake outgrew Bowie. Bowie is now smaller than Westlake. So you remember last year.
And really almost every year.
Right.
The past couple years at least.
Right. So last year, you remember, Bowie got in the playoffs. They went to the Division I bracket. That bumped Westlake down to Division II. Now, if the same thing were to happen, if Bowie were to get in the playoffs, they're smaller than Westlake. Westlake would go back up to the Division I bracket.
Man, so it seems
that's a small
really
thing that happened.
Likely that Westlake would go D1.
So right now they look likely to go D1.
D1, yeah.
The chance that changes if Del Valle gets in the playoffs. Del Valle is the second largest school in the district.
Yeah.
If they were to surge into the playoffs, and one of those 5A teams, Dripping Springs or Buda Johnson, and Austin Bowie were all miss it, or one of those were to miss it, two of those three rather, then that would bump Westlake to the Division II bracket. That seems pretty unlikely right now.
Right.
I think Westlake looks pretty destined to go Division I.
I think Dripping Springs should be the lock at that 3
Dripping
seed.
Springs looks good, and I think Buda Johnson is going to be pretty darn good as well. And even if they don't, I think the team that is most primed to take that spot would be Bowie, which still serves the same purpose to Westlake.
Yep.
Right? And by the way, we're talking about a difference of 12 kids.
Yeah, that seems pretty locked that Westlake will be going.
That was a really under the radar thing in realignment was that Austin Bowie Westlake outgrew Austin Bowie. So there you have it. That's what we're going to be talking about in week 8, 9, and 10. We're going to be paying attention to those teams, and that's why we're going to be talking about. Oh my gosh, there's a huge game this week, and it's between Mansfield and Waxahachie.
Yep.
And you were like, what's the big deal there?
Like,
the reason is that could have huge, far-reaching implications on what the playoff brackets look like in Class 6A. So there's my picks for the most consequential teams in 6A heading into 2022.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you would like more and to be notified when they come out, go ahead and click that subscribe button right down there. You can also watch Texas Football Today every day live at noon on TexasFootball.com, Facebook, Twitch, and right here on YouTube. For more of the best coverage of Texas football in the Lone Star State, go to TexasFootball.com/subscribe.